Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Edge of Dawn by Anna Carven. Narrated by Rich Miller. 1. He sat on the cold stone floor, legs crossed, hands laid on his knees, palms facing upwards, toward the silent stone ceiling, toward the immense weight of layer upon layer of earth and rock, the ancient outer crust of this chaotic, vegetation-infested planet. They, his captors, had tunneled deep beneath the sun-scorched surface, building a labyrinthine network of tunnels and chambers that would rival any of the networks on Kythia. They were still going. He could feel the faint vibrations of the machines as they ate through the inert, lifeless rock. The sensation was strangely comforting. He imagined arteries and veins growing inside a body, warm blood rushing to fill them. They were conquering the underground, where the vicious rays of the sun couldn't touch their silver skin or blind their darkness-piercing eyes. His kind. He still hadn't decided if they were to be his enemies. For now, he had decided to accept Tarak Al-Akkadian's bargain. Once again, he would become someone else's weapon, in exchange for his life. His lips curved into a bitter smile. Some choice. He emptied his mind of all thought. He slowed his breathing and focused on the sensation of the cold air dancing across his bare skin, across his bare chest, down his arms where a faint halo of kaki rippled and flowed across the palms of his hands, into his fingertips. He allowed his essence to flow out into the universe. He allowed the void to seep into his mind. Pure, blissful nothingness slipped into his cracks and fissures, momentarily erasing the scars left after a lifetime of pain. Thousands of tiny wounds, insignificant little deaths inflicted by his own wretched, calloused hands. Beneath the grandeur of the universe, everything was insignificant. Him most of all. He closed his sightless eyes and drifted outside his body, allowing the void to take him. Until he felt it, the faint tendril of a familiar thread. Wondering if he would come to her again. So he followed it, seized it, and eventually he did. He resurfaced in a subterranean room, but unlike the place where he'd left his mortal body, this one was filled with light, thanks to a transparent panel in the ceiling. Of course, he couldn't see the light with his blacked-out eyes, but he could sense it with his second sight, the powerful sixth sense that encompassed all others. He could feel the billions of microscopic particles of energy colliding with his ephemeral body. If this were his real body, he would be wincing in pain as the sunlight burned through his pale Kordolian skin. But here he was only a projection, an extension of his own intangible will. In the void he drifted, until the lines of reality became blurred and he came as close to freedom as he'd ever been. But really, freedom was just an illusion, a distortion of perception. Because he'd allowed himself to be dragged into the consciousness of another being. This time, this is where she'd conjured him? Into this silent underground room carved into the thick stone of Earth's crust. It was filled with strange human objects. Some he could guess the function of. There was a table and chairs, an area arranged with low seating, a pipe and a metal basin, presumably for water and washing. But there were other objects that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Flat, square things on the walls depicting various scenes. Soft, square things on the seats. Vegetation growing in mismatched round vessels. A bowl filled with sickly, sweet-smelling, bizarrely shaped fruits. Sensing the magnetic pull of her presence, he crossed the chamber, passing through an arched doorway fringed with long, beaded strings. If he were in his corporeal form, he would have pushed them aside, but he just drifted through them, entering what was obviously a sleeping room. There was a pod in the middle, human-made, flat, rectangular, uncomfortably exposed, dressed with inelegantly crumpled linens. and in the midst of that small nest of chaos, there was her. "Oh, it's you again." She lay on one side of the rectangular pod, her arms and legs splayed out, hair tousled, eyes barely open. Her brow was slightly furrowed, as if she were in some sort of discomfort. "Hello again, dream boy. This is the third time you've appeared now. I've never had that before. My subconscious must be trying to tell me something." Her voice was tinged with irony. She spoke in heavily accented universal, staring at him with a half-lidded gaze. "I am not a boy," he said mildly, hiding his irritation. It was because that old hag, the mistress, used to call him that. Well, she was dead now. "You look young, but I suppose I'm saying that from a human perspective." "I am older than I look." "Well, if my suspected reasons for conjuring you are anything to go by, then it figures. Lucky you." He snorted derisively. What was she even talking about? Conjuring? Lucky? If only you knew, foolish human. "And neither am I a dream, whatever that is." "But you are my dream." "Explain." He leaned his incorporeal body against the wall and folded his arms, not sure what to make of this strange being. The only thing he knew for certain was that when he meditated, drifting in and out of the physical world, into the void that existed between all worlds, he'd somehow appeared in her consciousness. Their first contact had been fleeting. The second one had been intriguing. And this time, the third, she was completely unsurprised to see him. "Well, since I'm asleep and this is all a dream and you're not real, I suppose I can tell you anything I want." She closed her eyes and placed her hand on her forehead, brushing back her long, messy hair. "What are dreams, huh? I suppose they're little alternate realities that our brains randomly create when we're asleep. They're made of lost thoughts and memories and hopes and fears, wishes, the impossible. Guided by our subconscious, trying to tell us something, I suppose. Maybe they predict the future. I don't know." "Ah, thought-walking." He'd experienced something similar once or twice when he hadn't yet developed full control over his kaki. There were times when his sleep thoughts had become wild and terrifying. Did humans lose control of their minds all the time? "Is that what your people call it?" "That's what I call it." He shrugged. Outside of the program, he hadn't had much contact with his so-called people. Her eyes widened. They glowed with bright, luminous energy and all too human curiosity. She was completely unafraid of him. But if she understood what he truly was, she would run. She would try. Clearly, she was one of those rare humans who possessed the talent, somewhat like Ashriel's mate. The fact that she could draw him to her while he was in the void was proof enough of her power. Pray to the goddess that he would never have to come for her, like that. He hadn't had to eliminate many humans, but the ones he'd encountered so far were disappointingly weak. Far too easy to kill. Maybe that was why he found this scenario so amusing. A weak and fragile human female who was bold and unafraid to speak her mind. To him, of all people. "At least now I know that you can speak," she said softly, pinning him with a look of pure fascination. "You were awfully quiet the last couple of times. I thought you were just being rude, but you do speak universal, huh? I just guessed, seeing as you're an alien and all. You're not like the guys I've seen on the networks, but there's a similarity. Are you a kind of—" Her brow furrowed. "Kordolian?" "I am." He inclined his head, his amusement turning bitter. It was the first time he'd been able to speak in her presence. She had no idea that he'd only just been released from his curse of silence. "We don't all look the same, you know." "Now I know. Makes sense." Her gaze traveled slowly down his body, lingering on his bare torso, on his loosely clad hips. My subconscious is definitely trying to tell me something. He stared back, a disbelieving half-smile curving his lips. Nobody had ever dared give him such a look. Nobody, let alone a human. Unable to help himself, he leaned forward, playing into her little fantasy. "And what would that be?" Her long, slender fingers slipped between the V-shaped folds of her garment, a soft, flowy thing loosely belted at her waist. Her hand came to rest on her chest, in between the tantalizing swells of her breasts. "Well, alien man, if you really want to know, I believe you exist because my mind and soul are rebuking me." Alien man? This female was ridiculously impudent. "I have a name, you know." "Oh, you do? Go on, then." She gestured with her hands as if she were responsible for conjuring his infernal name out of thin air. "Dragek," he said matter-of-factly. "Dragek." She shaped his name with her human accent, with her plump, delicately shaped mouth. "Of course." "And I am not, as you so strangely put it, a rebuke." "Oh, but you are." Her voice deepened, becoming slightly hoarse. "You're what my mind throws at me as punishment for being celibate for so long." A soft sigh escaped her lips. 2 years. Not entirely by choice, mind you. What in the 9 hells was she going on about now? Abruptly, she sat up, folding her arms across her chest. "Never mind. I'll probably wake up any moment now. It always happens." Dragek regarded the human with a mixture of amusement, curiosity, and irritation. What foolishness! Who did she think she was talking to? He'd never encountered anyone like her before. He'd never been in a situation that was so infernally unserious. Why in the infernal 9 hells had he been drawn to her in the first place? She was spectacularly ignorant. She had no idea how to wield the kaki or even sense the innate energy of another. How pathetic. With his second sight, he engulfed her for just a moment, sending a ripple of kaki across her body, taking in every last detail. Studying her. For just as she said, he would have to leave her soon, and he wasn't sure if he would encounter her again. She stared back at him, going very, very still as he withdrew his psychic touch. What the hell was that? Dragek said nothing. He didn't have to explain himself. He was simply curious because he'd never been alone with an innocent that he didn't have to kill. The beings he'd encountered in his life were either prey or captors. There was no in-between. Maybe that was why he couldn't stop watching her. She'd dressed herself carelessly in a loose, flimsy top that barely covered her chest. Her body was strong and curvaceous. Her waist was narrow, her hips generous. Her legs were encased in a pair of worn, floppy trousers. Her hair was a chaotic mess, long, tangled strands falling around her perfect oval of a face. Its hue must be what the sighted ones called dark, for it absorbed the microscopic particles of light rather than reflecting them. She caught him staring. She stared back, once again giving him an up-and-down, all-over look, as if he were merely a pleasing object to be possessed and admired. Her eyes narrowed, thick, curved brows drawing together in a quizzical expression. "That's it. The next time you and I meet in a dream, we're going to have sex." What in the 9 hells? Dragek couldn't help it. He laughed, a cold, bleak sound. "We will only meet again if I allow it. I have not yet decided if you are worth the trouble." Touchy, aren't you? I'm only saying aloud what any normal heterosexual woman would think if a man like you repeatedly showed up in her dreams. It was her turn to laugh, a short, sharp sound that was filled with disbelief and perhaps a hint of fragility. It would be so easy to crush her. In the background, some distance from the dark chamber where his corporeal form was sitting, he sensed an approaching presence. Time to leave this foolish insanity. But before he did that, He would leave her with a parting gift, something to unsettle her. She couldn't have it all her way. He was in control here. Dragek reached out and found that she was indeed receptive to mind speech. So he spoke to her in another way. "And what would you do, human, if it so happened that I was real?" He felt her shock, her fear, which she so quickly tried to hide. She stared back at him, completely serious for once. "I don't have to answer that, dream boy, because there's no way that someone like you could possibly exist." 2. Oh my stars, what was that? Jade promptly flopped back down on the bed. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, hoping to hell and back that the alien in her dreams really was just that, a dream. I've been asleep this entire time, right? Because if he wasn't a figment of her imagination, as he himself had said, then she was in a whole lot of trouble. Come on, just go to sleep, damn it. But her mind was buzzing. She couldn't shake off the feeling that she'd just encountered something mythical and powerful and forbidden. Dragek. He'd inserted himself into her consciousness with effortless arrogance, as if he ruled her dreams. She'd dreamed of people before, of strangers and objects of desire, figments of her subconscious that were so intense she felt as if she'd known them for a lifetime. Sometimes, when she woke up, she felt like she'd lost something profound. She'd been having these crazy, vivid dreams ever since the accident. Normally, sleep was elusive. Most of the time, insomnia was her companion, but when she did manage to fall asleep, she would slumber so deeply that even the loudest disturbance couldn't wake her. Once, when she was visiting the northern tropical city of Darwin, she'd slept through a cyclone, waking to find the trees outside stripped bare of their leaves as the morning sun rose above the eerily calm aftermath, while ominous gray clouds and monsoonal rains loomed darkly in the far-off distance. Oh well, he's just another figment of your imagination. She would ignore him just like she'd ignored all the other voices that had spoken in her head since the injury. The real voices. Those stupid voices were the reason she was here, hiding out in an underground dwelling in the abandoned town of Kuberpedi. The Federation's Healthy Mind and Well-Being Agency, the MWA, was after her, and this was the only place on Earth she could think of where she could lay low for a while and buy herself some time while she figured out her next move. Apart from a couple of old, crusty, cantankerous individuals, holdouts who wouldn't ever sell her out to the government, the town was completely deserted. The opals had been mined out long ago, leaving the sun-blasted earth scarred and pockmarked with mine shafts and craters. Well, nearly all the opals were gone. Jade knew of a few secret pockets where, with a little skill and knowledge, one could unearth the most precious gems. Just the other day she'd found a 5-carat red opal. Polishing had revealed brilliant fiery shades of crimson. It was a high-grade opal, extremely rare and valuable. In the past few years, demand for Earth-origin gems had soared thanks to alien buyers. Apparently, opal didn't exist on any other planet in the universe. If she found the right buyer, she could get good money for it. Not enough to get her out of this predicament, but enough to sustain her here for some time, until she figured out her next move. She'd already removed her tracking implant, cut it out with a store-bought scalpel. It had hurt like a bitch even though she'd used numbing cream. But if she ventured anywhere too public, there was always a chance they would identify her on the body recognition surveillance systems. She'd initially thought of escaping off-planet, but now that the Kordolians had taken control of Earth's orbit, that possibility was looking more and more remote. Especially if they were anything like him. Dragek. Are you real? If Kordolians were taking over, there was no way she was getting off this planet. Out there, in the cold void of space, how could anyone, especially a human, possibly survive? She'd have to look at other options. Underground surgery was a possibility. Get them to change her face, her eyes, her voice, her gait, her fingerprints, until the AI no longer recognized her. She would have to get a new name, too, a new biosig, a whole new identity. She would have to find the right people, biohackers and tech people who did this sort of thing. She'd have to go to Darkside. All of that would be terribly expensive. She had no funds to speak of. She was cut off from her family and from her husband of 2 years. Bloody Cameron. He was the one who'd pushed for her to undergo the neurotransmitter and receptor modification procedure, otherwise known as NERM. They all thought she was in the grip of psychosis. According to everyone else, the voices were just hallucinations. She couldn't possibly be hearing real voices. But then, to the surprise of her treating team, the meds didn't work, and the NERM didn't work, and the voices kept flooding in, and they were even louder than before, and once, when she'd tried to talk to them, they'd talked back. That had freaked her out more than a little. Treatment-resistant psychosis, not otherwise specified, they called it. That was her official diagnosis anyway. Translation? They had no idea what was going on. Apparently, her brain activity scans were highly unusual. But out here, in the middle of the desert, she didn't have to worry about the voices because there was almost nobody around. When she moved away from populated areas, the voices went away. Funny that. At least here, she didn't have to worry about her husband, well, ex-husband apart from on paper, who'd been trying to get her committed to the Wellmind Institute for the past 6 months. Wellmind was a last resort. Only the most difficult cases were admitted there. Cameron had already frozen her accounts, but unless she was officially declared mentally incapacitated by the MWA, he couldn't access her credits. She'd escaped before they could legally determine that she was incapacitated. Besides, she wasn't. Cognitively, she was intact. She could research, strategize, and execute a plan. She knew exactly what was going on around her. With nothing but a few unmarked credit chips and a backpack full of clothes and a hat and a mask and sunnies to conceal her face, she'd fled Sydney by airborne taxi, getting off in Canberra, then taking the most circuitous overland route to this underground bolt hole. She'd gone on foot, then by electric scooter and hoverbike, staying at a pod motel, using her credit chips to buy meals and drinks from retail bots and vending drones along the way. She'd hitched rides on produce transports and mining rigs. The bloke who'd dropped her off in Coober Pedy had been in a rush to get to Telluria. Something about delivering his cargo, then getting back home, which had an underground bunker from the sounds of it, before everything went to shit. It wasn't unusual to hear people talking like that these days. She'd been catching snippets of doomsday panic from people ever since the dark ships first appeared in Earth's atmosphere. The rumor going around was that the Kordolians were finally going to take over Earth, to officially invade. "About bloody time," Jade muttered wryly, rolling off the bed in frustration. There was no way she could sleep now. She'd just take a dissolvable Neuronol and try to calm the fuck down. In her silent underground home, which had been passed down through her family for generations, she felt restless and desperately lonely. There was nobody she could reach out to. Any contact with family or friends would risk her location being pinpointed by the Federation. All she could do was keep going down into the mines, searching for the rich veins of opal that might lead to the mother lode. Thankfully, the mining robot was still here. It had helped her a lot. There had to be more opals where that quality red specimen had come from. All she needed was one big one. She'd find a buyer, get her money, get her body biohacked, and disappear. Away from her once besotted husband. Away from the MWA and the Federation's digital eyes. She'd find somewhere remote and secluded, where people's voices wouldn't invade her mind. Even him? No. She had no doubt that if he wanted to walk through her dreams again, there was nothing she could do about it. 3. The shadowed entrance to the mineshaft was a welcome respite from the blistering midday heat. Jade adjusted her headlamp and climbed down the rusted steel ladder, testing each rung with her foot before she put her full weight on it. The ladder was a couple of centuries old, but it was still functional, and safe enough. She'd rigged up a safety line attaching it to the top rung, so if she did happen to fall, there'd be something to catch her. The mining robot was strapped to her back. It was heavy. It had to weigh at least 10 kilos or more, but Jade had played a lot of touch footy when she was younger, and although she'd lost some conditioning, she was still reasonably fit. Strong enough to give a robot a piggyback, at least. As she reached the bottom, she unhooked her safety line and activated the robot, placing it on the dusty ground. "Initiate a prospecting run," she commanded. The robot's indicators flashed green. Suddenly, it was away, crunching over the dust and gravel with its rubberized tracks as it scanned the mine shaft, looking for veins of opal in the rock. Jade's headlamp shone down the long passage, which had been carved into the thick sandstone, the ceiling buttressed at regular intervals with wooden pillars. The mine was long abandoned, deserted when they thought there were no more riches to be pulled out of the rock. Jade knew better. She had a huge advantage over the miners of the past. She had tech. The robot was called Gitera. It used a highly sophisticated AI and radar combination to identify potential dig points in the rock. She'd had some success with it so far, even using it to locate valuable gems in the Moloch heaps, the mounds of loose earth that lay all around the opal mines. The Gitera had belonged to her father. When Jade was a kid, he used to bring her here during the Easter break so they could try their hand at fossicking. It was more of a novelty thing, living in an underground dugout, a home inherited from her great-great-grandfather, navigating the cratered opal fields, picking through the dirt and rocks, hoping for that elusive prize. She remembered the strangeness of it, so far removed from her city upbringing. The excitement, the feeling of adventure. The shock of the clear night sky, decorated with glittering stars and the elegant curve of the Milky Way. It was one of the few times she'd gotten to spend quality time alone with her dad. It was probably fitting that when she was on the run, desperate to escape the authorities, she'd ended up here of all places. A faint whir reached her ears as the Gitera sped on ahead, analyzing the rock. She took a step forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. She started to walk. Then she heard something. Voices. "See these footprints here? Someone's been down here recently. Ah, look, there's a safety line attached to this rung." The speaker was male. She didn't recognize him. "Get the thermal scanner and the gas. If she's in one of these holes, we'll flush her out." "Yes, sir." Noises reached her from above. The sound of humans moving about. Oh, shit. She couldn't go back up. There was only one way to go, deeper inside. That posed a problem. The main shaft was safe enough, but if she veered off into one of the side tunnels, she could encounter unstable rock or low oxygen. Jade switched off her headlamp. "Gitera, stop," she whispered. "Power off." She couldn't allow its glowing indicator lights to give her away. The robot slowed to a halt, cycled its lights, and then switched off. So much for the promise of riches. She had to figure out a way to get out of there. If she was lucky, there might be another exit tunnel further along. She heard footsteps, people coming down the ladder. Was that 2 or 3 of them? Had the Federation caught up with her already? But how? She didn't have her tracking implant anymore. She hadn't accessed any kind of service that might lead to her biosig being logged. And the family dugout was off-grid. As far as she was aware, there weren't any Federation surveillance towers in the tiny settlement either. She quickly moved down the corridor, trying her best to make her footprints silent on the rough earth. There was a thud as one of the men landed on the ground. She quickly rounded a corner, fearing.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?